Without further ado, I'm going to introduce the man, the myth, the legend, David Cobb, who's going to be facilitating this amazing panel here today. And for some of you, David needs no introduction. He is one of the co-founders of Cooperation Humboldt, which is a transition initiative in Northern California. He's a member of our National Collaborative Design Council. He also ran for president on the Green Party ticket, helped to co-found the Move to Amend organization, is a people's lawyer, among many other talents. So passing it over to you, David, and thank you for organizing this.
Oh, Don, thank you so much for those incredibly kind words and for all the work that you do to keep the transition cats at least moving in the same current. And you know, y'all, whenever I talk about myself, I always actually say that the way I think of myself is as a straight up revolutionary. Now, don't get alarmed. I'm a nonviolent revolutionary, right? I don't believe in using violence as an affirmative political tool, but I am a revolutionary because I believe that this country is fundamentally sexist, it's fundamentally racist, it's fundamentally class oppressive, and as if that's not bad enough, and I think we can all agree, like, that's horrible, what I just said, but really, gut check moment, the huge transnational corporations are literally going to destroy the planet that we depend upon for life itself if we don't interrupt them. So I'm a revolutionary because I think that we have to restructure society. And the other reason I say it is because I'm actually trying to normalize that conversation. I'm trying to get other people who know in their hearts, in their heads, in their bodies, that they know that we actually have to restructure society and normalize it and say that it's okay to be a revolutionary. In fact, we're called to be revolutionaries by this moment. And I'm saying that as the way to introduce the first panelist. His name is Shimako Noble. I met Shimako Noble, and from our initial conversation, he self-identified as a revolutionary, and he was not embarrassed about it. He was not, and he just sort of, like, he just talked about it like, yeah, of course, right? And then went on. So I've gotten to know Shimako over the years, both as an artist, a culture worker, a rapper. He taught me how to sit down in a group of people and try to fumble over myself and participate in what I now know to be a cipher. He and I and Ruthie traveled around the country doing, I see you laughing at me. You're laughing with me though, right, Mark?
Wait, I'm sorry. I didn't hear that, but I was laughing because you said what I now know to be a cipher. I'm keeping that one forever, but go ahead.
So looky here. So Shimako is, he's an artist, he's a culture worker, he is also a revolutionary, right? So what I'm going to do is introduce each panelist one by one by asking the question, Shimako, why are you part of a conversation that is posing what is the intersection between the artist and the culture and a culture worker and social change?
I think the easiest way to answer that question is to say, because in some ways, the question indicates that our collective thinking is still shy of the mark. And it's not a process that can resolve itself without engagement, without discussion. I want to say without leadership, but I don't know so much that, I mean, because everybody can be a leader in any given circumstances, right? But you know, I was thinking about what I wanted to sort of put into the space today for our collective consumption. I know I saw somebody in the text or in the chat room said, Monty Smith, culture eats policy for lunch. That needs to be a t-shirt or a bumper sticker or both. But I think one thing I want to throw in here is like a definition of culture. Because I think when we look at the definition of culture, it's really funny because there's two definitions we can use, and one places art sort of almost like in a subservient position to the rest of society, but the other one places culture as the container in which everything else is held. And to just jump into the conversation without clarifying which area we're coming from, it sort of changes the space in which we can operate. So, like the first definition, this is fresh off of our good friend Google. The arts and other manifestations of human intellectual achievement regarded collectively. So, here we have a definition, and it's sort of, again, rooted specifically in the arts and other manifestations. It specifies human intellectual achievement, right? As opposed to any of the other forms of achievement. I mean, this is maybe an oversimplification, but we were talking about the Chiefs, right? Is sports a cultural achievement, right? And then we have a second definition: the customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social group. Like, how much bigger is that space, right? Because we've now gone from just talking about this small little section of production and this small little section of humanity to like basically your entire societal operation, right? And so when we're talking about culture and social change, it's almost weird to even separate those things, really. Because you use the phrase, arts, culture, social change. You could say cultural change and be saying all three of those things, right? How much time do I have? Because I can go on forever, but
I mean, if you want to wrap up that thought,
yeah,
that's the first. Yeah.
So I'll just wrap up and pass with this. I think we have to look at why we would be using one or the other of those definitions. I think one of those definitions is based on a methodology of, I don't know, I want to say production or exploitation, whereas the other is actually based on the observable human condition. And if we could imagine a world, we're talking about what's the world like, post-capitalism. I mean, what is the world of cultural production like post-capitalism? Who makes the movies? What is the basis of quote unquote fame? These sort of questions. And like Cooperation Humboldt and Cooperation Jackson have taught us, how many of these questions can be resolved before capitalism falls? Because I would imagine there's actually quite a few of them. Anyway, thank you for your time, Pat.
Fantastic. You can see, y'all, why I wanted Shamako in this mix and why I roll with him. The next person that we'll hear from is Marina Lopez. Marina is also an artist, culture worker, and social change agent. The medium I'm most familiar with her is through dance. I also want to lift her up because Marina has taught me to try to experiment with and grapple with somatics, but like, how am I in my body and how am I moving through the universe and how am I feeling about that? Because I personally have a tendency to frequently be in my head. I don't doubt that many in this circle probably are like that with me. Marina has pushed me, enticed me, inspired me, challenged me to think about somatics in a different sort of way, for which I am eternally grateful. In fact, she was in the crowd whenever I tried to open a session somatically for the first time. And it felt a little bit scary, but I channeled Marina as I did that. And so as I welcome you into, and by the way, I should say, Marina is on the board of directors of Cooperation Humboldt. So in like, at least legally, kind of my boss. So you don't have to be on my best behavior. Um, so Marina, I'll pose the same question to you. Like, what brings you and entices you to spend some time on a question of the role of the artist and culture worker in social change?
Thank you, David. I've never thought of myself as your boss, so that's an interesting. I hope you don't either, 'cause that'd be very, very strange. We're not doing something right. Shamako, I really appreciated hearing your thoughts. Like, you just kind of like blew my mind a little bit more open. So thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like part of this conversation that I'm really interested in is also really trying to grapple with and understand and find clarity around and language, and not just verbal language, but also like visual and bodied language, to have conversations that like recognize the way that art, culture, and social change, like all the social conditions, are entwined within our culture and therefore expressed through art. So yeah, I'm really interested in better understanding how others are experiencing that relationship, so that I can grow a vocabulary, and again, not just a verbal vocabulary, to express that on a daily basis and normalize and centralize that in movement work. I saw someone talking about climate disaster, and I'm just like, you think about a bioregion as defining so much of our culture, within that region, and what will happen when that bioregion is drastically changed. Our culture is going to respond and shift to that. And artists, like, we have that capacity to change and reflect culture through the art that we make. And so I feel like, when we talk about artists as central to social change, it's in part because we have that ability to frame things, to understand things, to reflect things, and to envision new possible futures and ways through that kind of crisis. So yeah, I'm super excited to be here, and just thank you so much for inviting me, David. I really appreciate it. And yeah, looking forward to the conversation. So
Right
that's why I'm
on.
here.
And then it is my distinct pleasure to introduce the next conversationalist and panelist. Ruthie Engelke is an artist. Theater and acting is her principal medium, but I also know her as a storyteller of great skill. I also know her in a lot of different ways. So I'm just going to come clean and say I've been knowing Ruthie Engelke since I was in 6th grade. Ruthie is my collaborator at Cooperation Humboldt. She is my muse. She is also my partner. So I just want to be upfront about that. And Ruthie, same question to you. What brings you into a conversation? What inspires you to want to be part of it? And how would you begin to answer, what is the role of the artist culture worker in social change?
Whew. So art to me is life. It's been a part of my life since I can remember. I've been doing theater since I can remember, because my parents did community theater, and that's where I learned to love storytelling and music and painting and all of the creative arts in this, dusty, moldy old theater. And I believe that the role of the artist in social change is that we're storytellers. We can create entire worlds. I mean, that's what we do in the theater. We create a whole world for our audience to show something that creates empathy and understanding. And that for me is the goal of art, is that expression. And artists express that really well. It's not just beautiful objects that are out there for consumption. That's a story that we've been told. I believe, I'm also a teacher. I'm a retired public school teacher, and I believe that everyone is an artist. I believe that a lot of people have been told that they're not artists. But we are artists because we create worlds every day. You create the reality that you live in, you decorate your home, you create surroundings in order to create art, you cook. All of these things are arts that we do, and art is part of our daily life. And to me, that's been co-opted by capitalism, by this extractive economy that has extracted out of the art what can be sold, and thereby teaching all of us what is art, when it's really just our everyday expression of life, which really makes sense when Shamaka, when you say that about culture, because the culture is the food, the practices, all of those things, and all of those things are art. That's all of those are part of theater. So for me, artists are poised to be able to transition. And I pulled out this. I'm also the education coordinator for Cooperation Humboldt, and this is one of my very favorite pieces because it really helped me understand the economy, and that if we are living in an extractive economy now, where the worldview is that we have of consumerism, and how do we consume things, and how do we colonize? It's all based on a colonial mindset. If we're going to transition into a worldview that is caring and that is full of caring and sacredness, that worldview gets shifted by culture shifts. And I believe that, especially right now with all of the things that are happening and with COVID, one of the things that we're seeing is culture is shifting. And the question is how? How will it shift? Will we shift into living in fascism, or will we be able to shift into an economy that is based on caring and consideration for other people, where art is part of our daily lives and we own that? That's why I'm
Fantastic. And so, folks, what we're going to do now is I'm going to be the very light facilitator of basically a conversation between Shamako, Marina, Ruthie, and myself, right? I'll make sure that we are sharing space and that it flows. But to the three others, to Ruthie and Shamako and Marina, let's just have a chat, right? I will also invite participants because of the webinar to participate using the chat function, using the various tools. Don Hall will help us come up. And I want to thank those who have already done so. And also just lift up Ayako Nagano, who is on the board of directors of Transition US, who says, this is great. It helps me talk about what helps me talk about this with my 7-year-old, and so far he understands. So that tells me that we're up to something, and I'll use that as the next prompt, because all three of y'all actually, through your answer, there were many threads, but one thing that was common was really pushing this notion of, and Shamako did it from jump, like your whole question is flawed because it sort of separates where it shouldn't be. And I'll never forget, Ruthie, you were here when this happened. We were having a conversation at Cooperation Humboldt very early in the formation of Cooperation Humboldt, and we were in a circle, the founders and so forth, and we were talking, and the very first public thing we did was called Artist Dismantling Capitalism. This is the 4th one coming up this weekend. You'll hear more about it, but this is all a setup because I said to the group, well, you know, I'm a revolutionary, but I'm not an artist, but I know I need artists. And from across the room, one of my favorite artists shouted, everyone's an artist, David. And I want to show you my favorite artist, one of her works. There it is. Now I want to come up and make sure that you see it. Ruthie, will you read that so that for folks who may not be able to see?
Mm-hmm. Dear David and Ruthie, thank you for your donations to Cooperation Humboldt. P.S. David is a poopy head, from Bella and Tamara.
Bella McFarland is 8 years old. She is the daughter of Tamara McFarland, our colleague at Cooperation Humboldt. And at 8 years old, she knew what I probably once knew but had forgotten because this society literally trained me out of thinking of myself as an artist. Everyone's an artist, David, she shouted. I'm getting tears in my eyes because she saw with clarity that the distinction that Shamako tried to blow us out from jump, and both Marina and Ruthie moved to, and Ruthie said it specifically. She literally said, everyone's an artist. So if that's the case, then how can we better use both art to shift the culture into and transition into the world that we want? Like, what does that mean? Because I get it conceptually. And for me as an organizer, I'm like, so what do we do? What does that mean we should do? What should I be doing differently?
Yeah, I'm not going first this time.
Man, I was waiting for some magic to come out. Well, I think it's interesting, David. I feel like what comes to mind for me is just this idea of when you say everyone's an artist, of like when each of us has practices and experiences that affirm other ways of being and knowing that are not just intellectual or can be reflected in data points on a page. Like when we have those practices that affirm something that we know innately inside and maybe don't even need words to express, like that to me is art. And whether or not like we share that in a public forum or it's a private thing that we do, like to me, in my understanding, like that is what makes each of us, or that is part of what makes each of us an artist. So I think that like talking more about like centering the body, not just as like art, not just in the same way that art has kind of been an add-on, but that like we are bodies moving through these social systems that have been designed and having these experiences based on those social systems, like through race, through gender, like through economic status. All of those social impositions are translated into the way we are in our bodies. And so for me, I mean, I'm a dancer, I'm a body-based practitioner. Like I think about bodies all the time. I touch bodies all the time. I feel the way that those social things have impacted people's bodies. And so I think that for me, it's about really creating opportunities and language and normalizing and centralizing body-based practices as a part of art form, so that we can begin to better express and understand and integrate the experiences that these social conditions are having. So.
I want to go on to say that I think it's part of healing, and it's a part of practices that we've taken ourselves out of. Instead of becoming part of it, we numb out by sitting down and letting Netflix or whatever get fed to us, instead of being the creators. So for me, it is I'm still on that everybody's an artist. It's shifting and allowing people to express themselves and heal themselves and our society through art. I think it's a way of, I think that's it. For me, that's a key, because to me, I feel like in a way, like advertising has made art a weapon, a place where instead of feeling included, its goal is to make us feel like we need something else outside of ourselves, that we're not enough. So to me, using art in social change is flipping that narrative and bringing it back to its real use, which is through culture and understanding and empathy and that kind of joy of creating something together as a community.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff here. Yeah, I think one of the byproducts of existing in an exploitive society, or maybe it's a driving force, maybe it's not a byproduct, but health is not a societal priority, right? And so there's a couple of things that both of the previous speakers touched on, and it got to something I actually forgot to mention at the beginning that I really wanted to say, which is we kind of have this weird notion that we already know has been disproven, which is that politics is an intellectual exercise, when in fact it is absolutely an emotional exercise. And even to the degree that we as students of theory, or as students of revolution, or as students of social change, consume literature or videos or any other byproducts of culture, right? And in order to better understand the objective world in which we live, it's also still supposed to change our heart, right? Or we have already experienced that change of heart, and that motivates our desire to learn more. What we're really talking about when we're talking about social change, even if we're trying to get it policy, I mean, if the idea is that we convince our our local leadership or our state leadership or our national leadership, we convince them through facts and figures that one decision is better than the other. I mean, that's a pretty limited approach. And I don't think that the objective reality even bears it out, right? In reality, what Ruthie said is 100% accurate, and we see it every election cycle. Advertisements, I mean, a lawn sign's art, like whether we like it or not. I mean, you try designing a sloppy lawn sign, see what kind of response you get, right? Symmetry matters, color matters, font matters. And so, I think you don't want to be like petty about this, or I don't know, like small things matter, but I guess, yeah, small things matter. They really, in this conversation, they really add up. I mean, if something like recycling can be a thing, and I know, David, you're like, it's not a thing, but but whatever world we envision, we are going, again, I think both speakers spoke to this, we are going to have to start behaving as though we're in that world before it arrives, and not the other way around.
Well said. And I got to jump in, y'all. Like, so Shamako, that's a private joke with us. He has often heard me say, and then he teases me about it. Like, I do recycle, Ruthie and I recycle, but what I say is we're not going to recycle our way into sustainability. We're not going to recycle our way into shifting culture. So I want to thank those of you who are using the chat. Keep doing so. I want to lift up Theo, a colleague on the Transition US Collaborative Design Council, because he kicked us off with a really good question. That is, how can we help humanity see the beautiful future that many visionaries can already see is possible and in front of us? How can we help others see that?
The first thing I think of is by seeing it ourselves, and believing in it ourselves. I mean, that's how I go back to my art, theater. That's how I create a character. I have to see it first, and I have to see the world that she lives in, and and so I think that's the first thing we have to do, is we have to see it ourselves and believe in it ourselves, and have a really clear vision of what that looks like to us.
Yeah, and I think also, just like Shamako said, we have to live in the world as if it's, this, we have to be in that space as if we're already there. And so I think I really feel that in my work with Cooperation Humboldt. I mean, we live in a small Northern California town. And I mean, just today I was driving home and I saw two construction workers filling a little free pantry on the side of the road. And I got tears in my eyes, because I was like, that's amazing. That is like, I want to see people in our community wanting to help people have access to food.
Tell Marina,
What they
remind
are.
folks who don't know what
Yeah.
some folks don't know what a
So,
little food pantry is.
yeah, thank you. So a little free pantry, so Cooperation Humboldt, basically they're like those blue newspaper boxes. And we have had people volunteer to be stewards of the pantries all over the community. And so they're placed in front of their homes or businesses, and anybody can put food in, anybody can take food out. And it really is just this beautiful exchange. And there's no shame, or it doesn't have to be a transaction. It's just, if you need food, here's some food. If you have food to give, here, please give some food. And it just recognizes that sometimes we have more than we need and we can share that, and sometimes we need help, and it's okay to accept that. So like for me, that was a beautiful example of like we're already doing the thing. So I think that's part of it.
It's
Yeah.
interesting. Oh, go ahead,
No,
Shimon.
no, David, no, go ahead. I can go
Oh,
after
it's
you.
interesting because like what Ruthie and Marina have just shared in response to Theo's question is, as an organizer and the intellectual in the head, it's like, oh, that's what we and I understand is prefigurative, right? You prefigure the world that you want. Like you don't have to wait to elect a new state or militarily conquer a state and then get the apparatus. You can literally prefigure it and sort of move into it. And I also am reminded of another mentor friend, Punani Burgess, who is a activist in Hawaii. And she tells the story from Polynesian roots that you remember, like, so Hawaii is out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, right? And like, how did people get there? Well, they know that people literally traveled 1,000 miles or like 500 miles of open ocean, right? And that culture literally did that all the time. Crazy, right? So here is the and this isn't like mythology, like this is what they know to be true, and the story that they tell, that yes, we travel in dugouts, right? And then you prepare the dugout, but like, and there's a whole thing, but the way that whole process of migration starts is the first thing that has to happen, and the first thing that does happen is somebody is visited in a dream and is imagines the next island. Let that sink in. Like their whole culture is based around, and it's called a dream culture. And they don't act until somebody dreams it. And somebody dreams it, and then they come in and tell stories, Ruthie. Like part of their culture is constant storytelling, and somebody will just say, well, here's what I dreamed. Good to know that was a dream that happened. Like, keep us posted, because the dreams are talking to you. And then somebody else literally dreams the dugout and says, I had the dream of the canoe. Then I'm getting tears. Somebody else says, I dreamed of the tree of which that canoe will now be built. Don't know exactly where it is, but I know it when I see it because I saw it in the dream. And then somebody else will say, I dreamed that it was like, so there's a whole thing around envisioning this new world and this new place to go to. And they don't move until the dream is actually a vision that has been told to them. And their culture is that this is how they know that it's time to start moving.
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful things that we can do is just to imagine and behave and to interact with culture and cultural production outside of what capitalism tells us it should be. And even what I said is kind of tricky, because what I said is, it's like trapped in the English language, right? And like the term production, but it's functional, but it's also limited, or it's loaded. But I think when Ruthie sort of identified, right, we're all artists. I mean, I think that's 100% on point. And you know, it's funny. It's not just that we're all in our heads, right? Or it's not just that there's this weird sort of, I don't know, contradictory sort of semi-honesty about like the reality of emotion. It's kind of like everything is separated from itself. Like everything is isolated and alienated from itself. And so how do we put everything back together, right, in balance? It's not like a battle between the heart and the mind and the body, right? Because like I actually want them all in alignment. And I want those things in alignment with everyone I share space with, right? And whether that space is like a room or a home or a community or a planet. And I think that if it's challenging to like actually imagine, I don't want to be like, I feel like I keep wanting to quote John Lennon right now, but if it's difficult to imagine or to conceptualize what that means, good. It should be, because we don't know, right? For us, if somebody right now in this society, if somebody is not a serious artist, meaning if they're not trained in it, right, or they're not trying to make a career in it, or they didn't go to school for it, then there's this other term for them, which is they're like a hobbyist, right? And hobbyists, like that's a capitalist market too, you know? Like seriousness is a capitalist market and hobbyist is a capitalist market. And neither of them are the actual reality of the human relationship to creation, which is basically, I think, you know, as Ruthie said, it's life. Like that's, I mean, because we're gonna get down to it. Art is creation and creation that's life. And so to the extent that everybody has the power to create life in some way, shape, or form, and we don't have to actually ask anybody for permission for that. Like we can just do it. Anyway, yeah, go ahead.
You literally sort of brought us into the next question that I wanted to harvest out of the chat, and that's from Katrian. Apologies if I have mispronounced it, but Katrian says, invite everyone to come make communal common art. The invitation is of art, of community, of change. How do we do that? Ruthie?
Oh, you make me laugh. Okay, so at Cooperation Humboldt, we do something called Artist Dismantling Capitalism. We've been doing it for we're about to do our fourth one in what is it, like 1 day and 8 hours or something crazy like that. But we've done this every year, and the first 3 years we came together as artists in order to see what was everybody doing and how could we work together. And it was a big communal thing. We feed each other, and out of that has come a lot of artists organizing. Our art and culture program at Cooperation Humboldt is really, really strong out of that. But it's a place for artists to come together and who are social change artists and share with each other. So I'd like to share with y'all a little bit about what we're doing this year. So you can see, I'm going to share my screen. This is the website. Yep, 1 hour, 1 day, 1 hour and 16 minutes until we go. But this is basically our website here. And this year, we're doing a couple of things. One, we're doing a food drive for those little free pantries that Marina was talking about, because we're trying to work mutual aid into it. Usually we feed everybody there. This time we're trying to feed our community. We also are creating a public art show. So we put out a call to artists to say, you know, imagine a new world. What would that look like? What would that just transition to the next world look like? And so I haven't put it up yet, We still have Samantha Williams Gray here, who is talking about braiding sweetgrass, and which is beautiful. And so when you register, because you will, look at this one really quickly, because I'm going to change it out and put the art in. But this year it's online, so we'll have 3 days of speakers. And so somebody asked, who are your favorite revolutionary artists? Well, here are some of mine. Favorite revolutionary artists, and y'all can get to meet them at Artists Dismantling Capitalism tomorrow and the next day and the next, if you'd like. Marina, would you like to talk a little bit about that too?
I mean, it's my favorite event of the year, and it was my first introduction to Cooperation Humboldt 4 years ago, and I'm so grateful. And each year it just grows, and I feel like the conversations get broader, and also more specific within each session, which is really cool. And this year, I think it's a really amazing opportunity to not only tap into what's happening locally and who's doing what locally within Humboldt and our community, but also nationally. What are other communities doing, and how can we support one another and learn from one another? So I'm really excited to get to have kind of both that breadth and then, that also that depth here within this community. So yeah, I hope y'all check it out, and you can attend one session or all the sessions. There's Saturday and Sunday, there's kind of 2 happening at once. And then we're doing a really cool closing out called Idea Lab, which I think it's something new this year. And it's basically, when you register, we ask you, what kind of skills do you have? What kind of networks are you tapped into? For me, I'm a body worker. I work with Cooperation Humboldt. I can't remember what else I put. I think I have a truck, just different things. And so at the end of Artists Dismantling Capitalism, our last session, the ID Lab, will basically connect folks who need certain skills. We'll basically be creating a skill bank, or as I joked before, a LinkedIn for revolutionaries. And I hope that David liked that. I hope that it becomes a network that we can grow and tap into, and so that it's not just each of us isolated within our communities doing this work, but we actually feel like we're part of a much bigger movement and supported within that. So yeah.
And so I want to also just lift up, folks, that the Artists Dismantling Capitalism, it was the very first public event that Cooperation Humboldt did. And I'm totally sincere when I tell you that's part of the reason that we're being so successful. And I talk to, we are driven by young people. I mean, Humboldt is 88% white, but our base is much higher than just 12% BIPOC folk. We are a true multicultural organization. And I've talked to many people who were like Marina, I got jazzed and turned on by the Artists Dismantling Capitalism conference. And young people consistently say, it's because y'all are not scared to talk about the need to dismantle capitalism and restructure society. Or I'm here because you center art and culture, and you invite that into the spaces in all the ways. See, because to me, art is not, Marina said it in her opening remarks, it ain't an add-on. Shamako taught me this when we were working at the US Social Forum together. Culture is literally everything that we do and say. It's how we have created the world. That's remember earlier, Shamako talked about the more expansive view. I still remember the struggle that he had with others that were in the National Planning Committee planning group, right? In a strategic planning process. And I'll admit, I was the one I was also struggling. Several of the younger folk in the crowd were looking at us come on, y'all, this ain't that fucking hard, right? They were kind about it, but I could totally see, oh, I'm struggling. A lot of other colleagues that I hold in very high respect as serious organizers are struggling with what Shamako and his colleague were trying to walk us through. And the young people in the crowd, it seemed like anybody 35 or years older or younger were come on, y'all, catch up. You remember what I'm talking about? Happened in Jackson.
so I want to actually throw this in there. It's kind of, I guess, related both to the previous question and what you're saying. So and David, we talked about this. So like if you were to look at least a percentage of the people who were involved, like the actual organizers of the U.S. Social Forum, right? Like Will Copeland, local organizer for the Social Forum, artist, right? Adrienne Maree Brown, national organizer for the U.S. Social Forum, artist. Carlton, right? Carlton was an organizer for the first one, and I think also for the second one, right? Artist, right? Artist. So I think
Marco Noble, National Planning Committee
right,
coordinator,
artist.
artist.
And I think that's probably true in a lot. It's probably a lot more true than then we've learned how to interact with properly, right? Because people are used to having to separate their artist self from whoever else is supposed to show up, right? So, I mean, this is why I think it's connected but separate, or maybe separate but connected. One thing we could do to invite people into the space is just invite all of them, like their whole personage, right? Like your whole self is welcome here. Like you don't have to just bring your organizer or just bring your artist or just bring this one little section of you. Like we want you to contribute all of what you have to contribute. Because for the most part, people, at least in the experiences that I've had, and I would love to hear from other people want to bring their whole selves into a space. Like people don't always want to have to choose to compartmentalize these things. We're just taught we're supposed to.
Right. And folks, I also want to say, first of all, I got to say this. So Kat, I'm embarrassed. Of course, that was Kat. Kat is a colleague on the Collaborative Design Council who had asked that previous question. I tripped over the pronunciation of her name because I know her as Kat. So thank you for the question. I also am going to say, y'all, this is our 4th annual Artist Dismantling Capitalism. Shimako has been invited to, how many did I invite you to? Again, help me remember.
All of them. Oh, all of them. Yeah.
And so I'm going to invite him to the 5th annual Artist Dismantling Capitalism right here in front of everybody and ask if you'll finally say yes.
Yeah. You know, I was reading on Twitter the other day. If somebody asks you to marry them in public, it's not a shame to say no. That said, I would love to come.
All right. So look, some great conversation going on in the chat. I do want to lift up John Lennon must be in the room, right? Because Ruthie has caught Imagine. Shimako, it was on his lips. Now David Rampey actually says what we should do is seek out and support those voices that speak truth to power and show us a new vision of where we should be moving, freedom and equality. John Lennon and the Dixie Chicks. So as a Texan, I got to say, thanks for bringing Dixie Chicks into the conversation at the same moment as you do John Lennon. So mad respect there. I also want to shift just a little bit into asking ourselves, like, so like art, vision, like this is all rolling, it's natural and so forth. Like I know why I thought, you know what, this would be perfect for a politics and policy working group, right? Like why like art and policy itself. Thoughts there? And Ruthie, I'm thinking about the work specifically that you and others did here in Eureka with the art plan, for example, if I could entice you to talk about that a little bit, because to me, it is a separate thing, just like it's incorrect to separate art and social change. It is actually a mistake to try to separate art and public policy.
It's not Zoom unless somebody forgets to unmute themselves. Yeah. We'll have somebody disappear in a minute. No, I think it's really important to have artists involved in policy making. Actually, at the first Artist Dismantling Capitalism, one of the things that we did was here in Eureka, they had created an arts plan However, they hadn't talked to a whole lot of artists, we found out. Oh my gosh. And the artists that they did talk to were the traditional, artists, the bigger things. And we're known for our art here. We're known for our music and art scene here. So we found that really interesting, and so we critiqued it, and then we went to the council and said, here's our critique of this art plan. And they said, oh, we didn't think about that. Because that's what we're finding. They don't think about that. As we were closing up, and anyway, to make a long story short, before I go on to the next thing, they did it. They listened to us, and on the next, and they worked with us on the evolution of the plan. And the next town over, which is Arcata, when it was time for them to work on their creative plan, they knew to do better, and they knew to talk to artists and have our artists involved in the conversation. So that was a big win. But it's also important to include artists in all kinds of conversations. For instance, reopening plans has been really important. And one thing that we found is we have tried to work on creating what kind of reopening plan we can have for art, we found that a lot of the people who are making those decisions don't have any idea what are the issues or the problem or what it is, or that one thing is different from another. So for me, I think it's really important that that artists are involved in everything, that artists are involved in disaster response, that artists are involved in how we feed each other. Again, because everything is art, and I think that's important.
Are you just supposed to be talking? I was like, Ruthie, quick question. Have you written an article about that experience?
No.
Okay, I'll be hounding you about that offline. But
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome, and thank you. Yeah, I guess a couple of things sort of show up for me in this conversation. So the first is, I feel like we always talk about the Constitution as almost more of a prose piece than a policy document. We talk about the Declaration of Independence as a prose piece or a poem more than a policy document. We talk about the Bill of Rights more as a prose piece than we do as a policy document. We talk about the art of it. We talk about the values of it. We talk about the emotions that it's supposed to instill in people. And I don't know if we've found a way to do this yet, maybe in the future, but policy is the byproduct of writing. I don't know if it could be considered literature, if law can be considered literature, but I mean, it technically is a form of art. If you were, I mean, you could argue it pretty easily, I think. How something is written, how it is worded matters. This feels sort of relevant, sort of like a side note, but definitely like a part of the conversation. I have always felt like, so for those of you who don't know about hip hop, there's this whole thing about there being like 4 or 5 elements or whatever. And like the 4 elements being breakdancing, emceeing or rapping, DJing and production, and breakdancing or dance. And did I say graph writing? Graph writing. Sorry, I think I said dance twice, but graph writing. So I think people have always treated rapping like it's the most dangerous form because it's the most easily packaged and exploited. I actually think graph writing is the most dangerous form because it's the most difficultly packaged. And when you consider like the following things, one, a graph writer is almost automatically making a statement about how they feel about public or private property. So there's that. But 2, if you could actually consciously politicize a group of graph writers, like, could you imagine the messages that you could put anywhere you wanted to put them, however you wanted to put them? I mean, that's dangerous, And then also, I don't think any group of artists within the space of hip hop are actually as dangerously criminalized. Like, graph writers for doing basically what muralists do go to jail for years. Granted, you probably should choose where you're gonna, put things. But if we're talking about art being an expression of your political position, graph writers by definition are revolutionaries.
And thus speaks the sword of the West. That's how I first met Shamako, described as a rapper, the sword of the West, which really lands home at this moment. And I'm also going to, because you really made 2 points there, I'm going to go back to the first one, like challenging us to think about like the Constitution as policy document as opposed to just like evocative art, because that really hit me hard. Because many of you have heard me talk about, like, lawyer by training, and like, so, the Constitution, we're taught to revere that document, right? Like it's hallowed. And there's a way that I could argue that it should be. It starts "we the people," right? Like it suggests that government done correctly is all of us, right? Of course, who is the we, right? Like from jump, the whole thing is like, Shamako, you didn't get to be a we. Oh, by the way, Ruthie and Marina, you didn't get to be a we. Oh, and guess what? Y'all wouldn't know just by looking at me, right? Because white male, oh, I get to be a we? No, I was not a property owner, so I didn't get to be a we either, right? Like, so for the jump of that document, literally 10% of the human beings living on this colonized land, right? Like even to even begin with, we're not actually part of being people. But here's the point I want to make. The Constitution, when you actually read it, both as poetry and prose, it is a property rights document. I'm going to say that again. The US Constitution is a property rights document. It holds sacred property rights throughout. It took a Bill of Rights to even insert any notion of human rights, and that insertion is only in a very narrow form of what we would think of as political human rights. There are no conception of community rights or cultural rights or any of the broader understanding of human rights that you can find if you look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights through the UN, right? So even as a human rights, like the very few times that it comes in, it's super narrow, but wait, there's more. What about the rights of nature? What about the rights of Mother Earth that we're all actually part of? That document can't even conceive of it. I submit to you that the US Constitution, as a framing document, as both poetry and prose, both policy and art, is an incredibly limiting way to look at the world. And one of the things that we ought to be asking ourselves is, how do we actually remember what our ancestors already once knew, that we are not above nature, we are part of it, and that we are actually connected to one another, and that our lives are actually pledged to each other, whether we know it or not. And this false separation is actually what's getting in the way. And it's actually what is driving both white supremacy and heteropatriarchy and settler colonialism and all of it. Because here's the kicker for me. My mama taught this to me when I was 5-7 years old. There's enough to go around. All you got to do is share. All you got to do is share. So if there's not going to be a comment, then I'll go to the chat. But like, no? Yes?
I don't know how to follow that up, David. Except that like actually my follow-up to that is like we should write a new document that includes community, cultural, environmental. Like that's what I think. I'm like, all right, well, it seems like we have some work to do then.
So I'll tell you this. Oh,
Yeah,
hit it.
yeah, right. Like my comment is agreed.
Yeah, like amen. Yeah.
So here's the thing, y'all. So many, like Don mentioned in the introductory comments, right? Like that I was the co-founder of Move to Amend. Ruthie and I worked at Move to Amend together. Shamako, Ruthie, and David traveled the country doing a series of educational forums and art and culture events called What the Bleep Happened to Hip Hop for Move to Amend. And by the way, here is what the bleep happened to hip hop. The corporate commodification of what began as a liberatory art form is what the bleep happened to hip hop. How'd I do, Shamako?
Did great.
So here's the other thing.
Cultural education works.
It worked. Worked on me. I often say, y'all, I ain't smart, but I'm educable. Like if you're patient with me, you can teach me things. So here is the thing. Like I worked on Move to Amend. I'm very proud of that constitutional amendment. We got 58 co-sponsors now, Shamako. Like
Wait a
things are
minute,
rolling.
David, you know what? I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you, but actually there's something I do want to say about the constitutional comment real quick. And this just occurred to me, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Did it.
You know, when we are having a conversation about a new constitution, I think it felt very like pie in the sky for people. Like that's just ridiculous. But I think there's a lot to be said for the difference between looking at that as a policy conversation and looking at that as a cultural conversation. And I mean, because a lot of what we're talking about and the limitations of how we interact with certain aspects of our land or our country or our space, it starts there. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Which that sounds really cool, but like, what do you guys actually mean, though? You know, yeah. So I just think that, you know, we, for any number of reasons, we sort of dropped that conversation. Might be interesting to revisit it in an evolved form at some point in time in the future. Just throw that out there.
I think maybe Shamako, you're gonna lead that session at next year's Artists Dismantling Capitalism.
Oh, great, Marina.
Right?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You guys are like natural at this. You know, like very fluid. Very fluid, yes.
They're like charming gangsters, is what they
Yeah,
are.
yeah, exactly. Did I just get punked right now? I'm sure I did.
So the other thing so thank you for that, not an interruption at all. And it really leads me to this, like, and somebody at Highlander actually said this when I was sort of talking about the importance of that one constitutional amendment. Her name is Pam. She was then the executive director. Highlander is sacred space. It's where King and others literally planned out the civil rights movement, bringing Black, brown, and white folks together. And in fact, they got their corporate charter revoked by the state of Tennessee because they were actually convening, like Black and white folks were eating and sleeping under the same roof together. Right? So it's a really important place, right? It's sacred ground. Pam said this when I was trying to make the pitch for Move to Amend and that one constitutional amendment. She said this, you know, David, any movement that is powerful enough to amend the Constitution is powerful enough to rewrite the Constitution. That has stuck with me. And it occurs to me that in this moment of crisis, it might actually be a liberatory experience to revisit this idea and say, the Constitution is art form, the Constitution is policy, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Well, the current law of the land based on property rights is literally destroying the planet. And we need a new culture. We need a new supreme law. We need a new approach. That's what I'm thinking. I do want to make sure to catch a couple of things from the chat because Don did point out something that I did not know, and I can't wait to take a look at, but that is the founder of the transition movement globally started in England and then spread across the world, Rod Hopkins, is a pretty good artist himself. So I have the privilege of being in conversation with Rob next week. So I will now be able to touch on that. We're coming to the end of our time together. So I do want to just open it up for, Ruthie, Marina, Shamako, any any burning ideas or thoughts that we haven't covered yet that you were expecting or wanting to cover?
I did have this thought when Ruthie, when you were talking, and it's kind of been like a conversation I've been having in my head because I do that. But just this idea, Ruthie, when you were kind of responding to Shamaka about like food is culture.
Mhm.
And then it made me think about how like, well, food is a part of domestic work and it's a part of care work. And so really like domestic work and care work are culture. And therefore those who create that are artists and practitioners. And so just kind of like, because we've been having this conversation about art, culture, care, and the solidarity economy, like it just kind of made me think about like, what if we could really reframe how we understand the role of care workers within our society as artists as well. And so that's just been like going in my head. And when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, domestic work is culture work. Those are culture workers. They are artists. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out.
Well, thank you for that. I also want to lift up Aya in the chat, recommended a particular book, Rima Manicom's book, My Grandmother's Hands, which is about healing racial trauma through body work. David Rampey has challenged us to think about visionaries that can lead us into a new creative area of social and culture change. So the chat has been rich for those of you who have not been able to participate in it. I want to thank everybody for actually participating. Theo also put in a plug/challenge for Movement for a People's Party, which is an effort to create a new alternative political party. I'll acknowledge that into the mix and say that the Green Party actually is already, in my opinion, a people's party where we do not solicit or accept corporate money. And we've already elected over 10,000 people over the course of our 20-year history. And people don't know this, but the Green Party is the most successful alternative political party in terms of electing people actually at the local, municipal, and county level. And people always think that, why do you always run for president? Which kind of makes me laugh. It's like, we kind of don't. Like, that's actually not our main thing, not even by a little bit. But check out Movement for a People's Party, check out the Green Party, check out Democratic Socialists of America. Like there are a lot of folks who are working in electoral politics, and I don't turn somebody who takes a tactical different, approach into my enemy. So like, there are many ways up a mountain, right? So like, whatever you're inspired to do or however you're inspired to follow is a good way to talk about it. And I now have just now seen that I missed that there was also a Q&A section. So I'm going to ask this, Don. Thank you, Don. You must have channeled me because I just now saw it. So I'm going to ask this of the panelists. Can y'all talk about art, culture, and youth? Art, culture, social change in youth. How do we bring and invite more youthful conversation, our youthful voices into this conversation? And I'm going to insist that each one of our panelists answer that or react to it.
Well, my reaction is to allow the youth to express themselves and be leaders, because they're closer to knowing what it is to be an artist and than we are, actually, in my opinion. I guess just from teaching, it's so often we try to tell youth that we are the experts, but we're not. They're the experts in their own lives. And so as an elder, gosh, I just said that, I'm an elder. But as an elder, I think that my job is to help make the soil rich there. I'm going to use a gardening metaphor to help make the soil rich and help create an environment where young people feel like they can be creative and be a part of the process and have agency over their own futures. I think that's the really important thing, to step back and not be the expert.
Marina, did you want to jump in there?
Go ahead. Go
All
ahead.
right. Yeah. So I guess first, don't be corny. And you know, what do you mean by that? So I guess really what that means is, don't be inauthentic. Don't be patronizing. You're not saving anybody. And like, be open to the fact that you have just as much to learn from them as they have to learn from you, if not more. And be intentional. Like actually intentional. It's not like we're at I don't know, the young people space is always interesting to me. It's like we're at a shortage of young people. So you're like, so if you're asking the question, where are all the young people? The answer is usually either you did not invite them or they thought you were corny. It's only one of those two things. Right? Like, because if you invited them and they're cool with you, then they'll be there. But if I don't know, yeah. I think sometimes we don't take seriously enough. It's not everybody needs to like us, but we don't take seriously enough being present to all of the possibilities across the spectrum of human existence. Just get very comfortable in our spaces. And you know, if you're like, I can't relate to kids, they're human beings. They have the same range of emotions and experiences you do. So if you can't relate to that, it's probably not on them. Yeah.
Marina?
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of opportunity to create space for youth in education, democratize education. Sudbury models of education are an incredible way to empower youth, because you entrust them with the responsibility of their own education and you give them agency. And the students I've seen come out of Sudbury schools are incredible agents of social change and incredible advocates, because they've learned at a young age how to do that and they were respected in that process. So democratizing education, infusing the arts within education, not making it some extra thing, but like integral to what we're offering. I think, like Shimako said, like curiosity. I mean, yeah, youth. I mean, I don't know, my youth, I'm not 30 yet. I'm still young. But like, yeah, like curiosity and going in with that mindset of I have just as much to learn from you as you do from me. And I think that kind of mutual respect goes a long way. And as a young person, like, I'm going to inherit this planet, you know, like all the policy and all the shit and all the beauty, like that is on my shoulders to carry forward. And so really listening too. Listening, I think, is a big one. So creating opportunities for young people to speak and be heard, and to be curious about what their experience is, and how to, and think of yourself as a facilitator or co-facilitator in using the resources and networks that you have as maybe an older person to help bring into vision what young people are saying. So, yeah.
So we are all teachers. We are all learners. One of Shimako and I, a mentor, taught me a phrase, Jerome Scott. I want to lift him up. Jerome says, we have to learn to teach as we fight and learn as we lead. That phrase is, I'm sure he was quoting somebody else or paraphrasing somebody else, right?
Nelson. He was quoting Nelson.
Oh, was he got Nelson Fury? Well, Nelson was a genius. Like Shimako and I know, like, so one of our mentors, our shared mentors. So that's a powerful statement.
Jerome's mentor too.
I'm sorry?
Jerome's mentor too.
Jerome's mentor too. So, you know, I'm going to give everybody a chance for closing thoughts, but I also want to say, thank you, Aya. The Buddha said to learn through service is enlightenment. Marina, you dropped Sudbury School into it. And you told me, like, I was amazed, like you taught me about the Sudbury model, and you challenged me, and I found out that you were a Sudbury graduate, and you told me I hope you'll remember it. You told me uh, the anecdote of, well, if the students have total control over what they learn, how they learn, their educational environment, everything, right? And you told me the story of the kid who was like, okay, I want to say we get candy for, I forget, was it lunch every day, or it was about candy? Are you remembering this story? I could tell it, but it's like, it's your story.
I think so. Like, I think so. Basically, the school is run the way our democracy is supposed to. So each student and staff member has one equal vote. And each week, the student and staff come together in what's called the school meeting. And it's a time where they talk about new laws in the school, any kind of judicial proceedings that need to happen. And anybody can bring a proposed law. And it's kind of run like a town hall meeting. And so one kid said something like, I can't remember, like now I feel old, like it was a long time ago. But they proposed this rule that like you could only eat candy on school grounds or something like that. And they totally like, they proposed it as a law and everyone was like, no. The kids were like, we don't want that. We don't like that law. So
So I'll help you, Marina, because to me, what was like when you told that story to me, you went deeper and in a different direction. You said, so the proposal, and get this, y'all, instead of just being shot down like, no, that's not what we're going to do as policy, because it's a truly democratic space. And that kid had actually triggered the process by like, I proposed that, da da da. It gets taken seriously. And it's like, okay, well, then what you have to do now is go and get at least however many signatures to actually take it to the next level. So here's the process that you are now both empowered, but required to take, because you are actually empowered to do that, but there's a responsibility associated with your power. And it goes like this. And when Marini was telling it, it's like, the kid apparently was like, well, wait a minute, that I was just kind of popping off. And it's like, well, but making a proposal in this space is actually a serious business. So, and then going through it and then finding out that the other kids were like, no, that's a dumb law. Like, I don't want to only, like, the whole thing about like, if you actually trust people to take agency for making decisions, that young people will make good decisions too. Yes, they need to be mentored and guided, but you know what? I need to be mentored and guided. Like, I'm 58 years old. Like, I need help. Like, we all collectively need help. So that Sudbury model to me was and that story, like candy for all, that always stuck with me, Marina.
Yeah. And one thing I will say that's interesting is that in the last couple of years, actually, they have a judicial committee that meets every day, and the students of the school said, you know what, this process is not fair. And so they brought restorative justice practices into the school, and it was completely driven by the young people who knew. Yeah. And I heard that last year and I was like, that's incredible. Like, they made that happen because they saw like our system is not fair for everybody. And so anyway, check it out, Sudbury, Sudbury. They're incredible models of education. So yeah.
So it looks like we're coming to a natural close in the conversation. So I am going to give each of our panelists an opportunity for final thoughts. While they do gather their thoughts, it'll give me the opportunity to thank the participants who have contributed to this through the chat function. I want to thank the folks watching us live on Facebook. I want to thank the folks who are watching this recording wherever you are, and to specifically lift up and thank Transition US board and staff and volunteers and people all across the country, and in fact, all across the world, who are transitioning at the local level, who are saying that really what we've got is ourselves. There is a climate crisis. It's not coming, it's here and getting worse. There is an economic crisis By the way, capitalism can't solve the economic crisis because capitalism is the economic crisis, and late stage capitalism is actually increasing and feeding the ecological crisis. And the economic and ecological crisis are creating a political crisis, which is to say, the political crisis in this country looks like this. The current system can't solve the problems. And I don't just mean that they can't solve the problem of white supremacy and heteropatriarchy. Our political system wasn't designed to solve this. I'm saying something different. I'm saying the system can't even do what it was designed to do. It cannot continue to maintain order. There is going to be transformational shift. The question is whether it is a shift to the jumpin' joyous world that we on this call have been talking about or imagining, or is it going to be the brutal fascist dystopian future? I wish I did not see with such clarity that it's really, and I'm not a binary person. Folks who know me know that. And I know it can look like a lot of different ways, but I'm telling you, the system cannot hold. The neoliberal worldview will not hold. There is going to be something erupting. We're in interstitial conjunctural space. At some level, there is going to be a break, and I'm doing everything I know how to do to break in the direction of that beautiful, compassionate, loving world that we so desperately need and so richly deserve. So that's why I do what I do. And I do much of that work through Transition US, because Transition US is a place that invites that kind of conversation and imagination space. So I'm going to ask our panelists for your final thoughts before we turn it over to interim executive director Don Hall for final words.
I just want to remind people that, well, Don Miguel Ruiz says that every man is an artist. Every human being is an artist. We create our lives every day. And every day we are also fed all kinds of images that gloss over these contradictions that are true in real life. We see these kind of depictions. So I just want to remind people to, you have the capability to create yourself and to create an artistic way of living and live a beautiful life we all deserve.
I'll just say that on that, on that thread, just encourage each of us to find opportunities to feel, to take time to really understand and integrate what our body is navigating. And, if we're proposing that we create this exactly, and cute doggies. David distracting me with their puppy. Always. Anyway, my bunny writes postcards to David's dog. Anyway, it's a thing. Yeah. I have an art project going. And yes, he is very wise. That is Poppy the bunny. It was a COVID project that I will continue because it's fantastic. Yeah, if we're proposing to create a new society and economy based on care, we have to be able to feel in order to care. So I just really encourage all of us to deepen those practices and find time to feel. So thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation, and yeah, thank you.
Great closing messages. I was going last, right? Like that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, just quick. Just because it's famous doesn't make it more valid or important than any other form of art or creation. And it doesn't have to, we have to start transitioning ourselves out of letting capitalism determine what is valid cultural production for us and what is not. That's it.